3 syllables, Nayuk. 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 His name was Jerome Horwitz, but the friend. And when people finally noticed, the studio said nothing, his colleagues said nothing, the world said nothing. For decades, the question lingered in the background of every Three Stooges marathon, more complicated than any of those answers, and far more disturbing. Because what happened to Curly Howard wasn't just a medical story, it was a Hollywood story. A story of exploitation of a man valued only for what he could produce, kept working until his brain literally gave out and then discarded. This is the Curly Howard mystery, and today we solve it. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel is dedicated to uncovering the full, untold stories behind classic Hollywood's most iconic figures. Hit subscribe and the bell, new episodes drop every week and you don't want to miss what's coming. The boy from Brooklyn. To understand what happened to Curly Howard, you have to start at the beginning, because who he was in real life was almost the complete opposite of who he played on screen. Jerome Lester Horwitz was born on October 22, 1903 in the Bensonhurst neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. He was the youngest of 5 brothers in a Lithuanian Jewish family, the baby of the household, nicknamed Babe by his older siblings in that affectionate way families have with their youngest. His brothers were Shemp and Moe, names that will become very familiar as this story unfolds. As a child, Jerome was quiet, reserved, a mediocre student but a gifted athlete with a natural grace that showed up on the basketball court and later the dance floor. He took up ballroom dancing as a young man and he was exceptional at it. Fluid, rhythmic, light on his feet. That physical elegance would later become the backbone of one of the most explosive comic physical performances in cinema history. But Jerome's childhood wasn't without its shadows. At 12 years old, he accidentally shot himself in the foot while playing with a rifle in the backyard. The injury left him with a permanent limp, and in a decision that would define much of his life, he was too frightened of surgery to get it properly treated. Instead, he taught him into performance, was perhaps the earliest version of what Curly Howard would eventually become. His brothers Moe and Shemp had already entered show business by the time Jerome came of age, performing as part of comedian Ted Healy's vaudeville act. Jerome watched from the wings, fascinated, absorbing every piece of stagecraft he could. Then, in 1932, Shemp left the act to pursue his own career, and Moe turned to his little brother. The birth of Curly. The story of how Jerome Horwitz became Curly Howard is one of those origin moments so perfectly absurd that it almost feels scripted. When Jerome showed up to audition for Ted Healy, he had flowing chestnut brown hair and a waxed mustache. He looked, by all accounts, like a perfectly attractive young man, which was precisely the problem. Healy took one look at him and said he didn't look funny, he didn't look like a stooge. Jerome left the room. He came back minutes later with his head completely shaved. Healy looked at him and quipped, or perhaps sneered, "Boy, don't you look girly." Moe, standing nearby, misheard the word as concentration. And he was a natural, an untrained actor who operated entirely on instinct and improvisation. If he forgot a line, which happened regularly, he would fill the void with a woo-woo-woo or a string of nayuk-nayuk-nayuks that were often funnier than whatever the script had called for. His genius wasn't in preparation, it was in the moment. In 1934, the Three Stooges signed with Columbia Pictures and the Golden Era began. The Golden Era. From 1934 to 1944, Curly Man on all head Harry Cohn, a man we will come back to, viewed the Stooges as interchangeable, replaceable parts in a money-making machine. But the audience, and it was after that second divorce that the first cracks began to show. The first signs. Following his second divorce, Curly began to change. The weight started accumulating. He was a big man to begin with, broad and powerful, with the physical strength that his on-screen acrobatics demanded, but now the weight gain became noticeable and unhealthy. He was eating and drinking more than ever, filling the void that the failed marriage had left behind. The drinking in particular escalated. Alcohol had always been a social crutch for Jerome Horwitz, the way he but cumulatively devastating. In January 1945, Moe Howard had finally seen enough. He insisted his brother check into Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara. The diagnosis that came back was alarming: severe hypertension, a retinal hemorrhage. Symptoms include memory loss, personality changes, cognitive decline, difficulty controlling voluntary movements, and voice changes. Read that list again slowly. Memory loss, personality changes, cognitive decline, difficulty controlling voluntary movements, voice changes. Those are not abstractions. Those are a precise clinical description of what the people who worked with Curly Howard watched happen to him between 1944 and 1946. We cannot diagnose Curly Howard posthumously with certainty, but the pattern is undeniable. A man who spent more than a decade as, in the words of one historian, a human punchbag, taking real blows to the head on a punishing filming schedule, began showing the exact symptoms we now associate with brain damage from cumulative head trauma. The third layer is the personal devastation. In October 1945, at Moe's urging, Curly married a woman named Marion Buxbaum after a courtship of only 2 weeks. The thinking was that domestic stability might help Curly slow down, rest, recover. It was the wrong woman at the worst possible time. Within months, the marriage was a disaster. He threw out actors all afternoon and then greeted them warmly at dinner parties that evening. A man who kept a signed photograph of Benito, Moe, and Larry. Sympathetic directors like Edward Burns were patient, filming on Curly's better days and working around his limitations. But there were no more good days, not really, only degrees of bad. May 6, 1946. Moe, Shemp, and Curly simultaneously on screen. Those who were there said Curly, even then, came across brilliantly in those few moments. The instinct was still there, buried beneath the damage. A bright spot arrived in 1947. Curly met a widow named Valerie Newman, and unlike his previous marriages, this one was built on something real. Valerie loved Jerome, not Curly. She nursed him, cared for him, sat with him through the difficult days. In 1948, they had a daughter together, Janie. There was something resembling peace briefly in those years. But the strokes kept coming. In 1949, another major stroke confined Curly to a wheelchair. Then more strokes. Then the nursing home. Then the moment that Moe Howard was told by hospital administrators that Curly's mental deterioration was causing problems and they should consider moving him to a mental institution. Moe refused, flatly without hesitation. Curly was moved to the Baldy View Sanitarium in San Gabriel, California, where he spent his final days. Director Jules White visited him there toward the end. He never forgot what Curly said to him. "Gee, Jules, I guess I'll never be able to make the children laugh again." On January 18, 1952, Jerome Lester Horwitz, Curly Howard, died of a massive cerebral hemorrhage. He was 48 years old. The mystery solved. So what really happened to Curly Howard? The honest answer is, everything happened at once. There was the hypertension, a cardiovascular condition that was almost certainly genetic in part but dramatically worsened by obesity, alcoholism, chronic stress, and the emotional devastation of repeated failed marriages. Left unchecked, it created the conditions for stroke after stroke. There was the brain trauma, not provable with certainty in the absence of a post-mortem CTE analysis, but impossible to dismiss when you look at his symptom profile, alongside what we now know about the cumulative effects of repeated head impacts. A man who took real physical hits for a living, day after day, year after year, and who began showing the exact constellation of symptoms we associate with chronic traumatic brain injury. The science legacy. Jerome Horwitz died at 48, largely forgotten by the studio that had made millions from his talent, survived by his fourth wife Valerie and his daughters Marilyn and Janie, and mourned by his brothers, his partner Larry Fine, and millions of fans who had grown up laughing at a man they never fully knew. But here is the thing about Curly Howard's legacy. It won. The Three Stooges, Curly's era specifically, became one of the most enduring comedy franchises in American entertainment history. Long after Columbia had moved on, long after Harry Cohn had died in 1958 and been replaced, long after the studio system that chewed Curly up had collapsed under its own weight, the shorts kept playing. Television syndication made the Three Stooges available to new generations of children in the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, and beyond. Mel Gibson called Curly his favorite stooge. Steve Allen called him one of the few true comedy geniuses of the 20th century. In 2000, Michael Chiklis played him in a television film. In 2012, Will Sasso brought him to life for a new generation. His grandson performs at Stooge tribute shows under the name Curly G. And the thing Jules White told him in that final visit, the correction to his most heartbreaking fear, it came true. Curly Howard is still making the children laugh. He always will. That is the real story of Curly Howard, a story of extraordinary talent, personal pain, Hollywood exploitation, and a legacy that outlasted all of it. If this video moved you or taught you something you didn't know, please hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love classic Hollywood history. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Every week we go deep on the hidden stories behind the icons, the real stories, the complicated ones, the ones the studios didn't want you to know. Leave a comment below